Welcome into episode 407 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue, our special guest, a recurring guest, Xerxes Prue, Bridget's cat, and of course, Scott McLaughlin. So, Bridget, Scott, and Xerxes. Bruins lose to the Maple Leafs 5-4. They squander a 3-goal lead, which leads for the Bruins this year have not been easy to come by, let alone multi-goal leads. But when they find these leads, they find it very difficult to maintain them and to find a way to get 2 points. Last night, tale as old as time for the Bruins so far this year.
Sorry, he's trying to eat my cords already. And also, was that a cat pun? Because he said tail as old as time and his tail was whacking me.
Unintentional, but that's how good I am.
So my opening shift, now that I kicked the cat out, is just the lead that they squandered. And it's not only even the lead. They had a 3-0 lead. Pastrnak scored 29 seconds into the game. 2 power play goals. When is the last time we saw that from the Bruins? Like, they finally scored twice on the power play. Marchand had one and Geeky had one. And there was really a good portion of that game that you're like, okay, they're out shooting them. They're out playing the Leafs. Obviously they were outscoring them by quite a bit when it was 3-0. And then it starts to go downhill. Because they only played 40 minutes of hockey and didn't quite finish out the 60 very strong. And I do think that penalty that Wahlstrom took was like one of those turning point moments, because it comes in the end of the second period, carries over into the beginning of the third period, and then Marner scores with 6 seconds left on that penalty in the beginning of the third. And that was actually that was the moment Sacco pointed to as the turning point, where he said, I think that gave them momentum. We lost it. We weren't as good from that point on. And obviously that's not a great way to start a period, especially the third period. So it did go downhill from there. They gave up another goal not that long after that, ends up being tied 3-3. And then Pastrnak comes in, and he's always good against the Leafs. That's just what he does. So he scores again, another really beautiful goal. And so, okay, they have the lead again. Then what happens? This is another tale that feels like it's been told so many times. The Leafs score with 46 seconds left in the extra attacker on. And so it was Holmberg that scored, ties at 4-4. They go into overtime. Mistake. Like, I don't want to blame Lohrei altogether. He drives to the net, like, really good move, and doesn't score. And then when he tries to recover back to the point, he kind of stumbles, and then Marner goes on a breakaway, he scores. So it was a frustrating game for fans, that's for sure. And there's a lot more to come out of it, because I know this is one of your opening shifts. Like, Frederic gets injured. How does that affect the trade deadline? We'll get into that. Like, are there guys in Providence that could come up and at least make, a little bit more progress than some of the guys that are already here? That's stuff we want to talk about. We did get some mailbag questions too, so we'll try to answer those. We got some, like, after the game, like between late last night and us recording, like, we got a few emails that were very specific to yesterday.
Yeah, including, like, why is Oliver Wahlstrom still here? I also want to like run through all the different headlines I had throughout that game for my column. But I'll do that after, because that'll touch on a lot of what Bridget's opening shift was. One thing that I thought of throughout this game is this is the other side of what we've seen from the Bruins in recent years, where there had been so many games from the Bruins, and like the 22-23 season was, the extreme outlier, but games where the Bruins could kind of just turn it on for 20 to 30 minutes and beat a lesser team. And now they are the lesser team. like now the Toronto Maple Leafs are the good team that can just turn it on for the third period or maybe the last period and a half, if you want to say it started midway through the second. And ultimately, when they decide that it's time to go, there's just not anything that the weaker opponent can do to kind of stop the snowball from rolling downhill. And that's what that felt like to me last night, is that the Bruins just, when you go up against a good team, and the Toronto Maple Leafs are, whatever you want to say about their playoff failures, they're leading the division this year, second best record in the Eastern Conference. Like, the Bruins just aren't good enough to slow them down once they woke up and decided it was time to turn it on. And that really feels like, just a summary of like where this season is. The Bruins just aren't good enough. Like, they tried to point to silver linings after both Joe Sacco and Brad Marchand, say like, we did a lot of good things for 40 minutes. And it's like, yeah, well, it's a 60-minute game, and you don't win after 40 minutes just because you had the lead. Like, you got to finish it off. And they're not good enough. Like, it's not like there's the mistakes, obviously, but it's also just another team being better and being able to overpower you when they decide to get going.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be game 83, and Brad Marchand's going to be saying, "We just got to win a couple games." Well, Brad, the season's over. So they're going to always have that rhetoric after games, which I'm sure is frustrating for you guys in the locker room, because you're looking at a team that's 60 games in, or 59 at this point, but more or less 60 games in, and like, they are exactly what their numbers say that they are in every category. And yeah, I just think that last night, in certain ways, was a microcosm of the entire season for the Bruins. Now, for much of the season, the Bruins have been chasing the scoreboard. So in that sense, it wasn't a microcosm, because obviously they had a lead last night, and a multi-goal lead at that. But when Boston has had leads, they haven't protected them for the most part. And David Pastrnak carries the up. Now, they had 4 goals last night as a team, okay? But Pastrnak had 2 of them. He assisted on Geekie. So Pastrnak and Geekie, again, Pastrnak mainly, leading the way offensively. And beyond him, this team just doesn't have any offensive depth to protect leads. And their defensive depth, obviously, when you're missing Lindholm and McAvoy, that's going to take a huge blow. But it just goes to show that they're very fragile and very vulnerable. Now, most teams would be without their top 2 defensemen, but even when they were in the lineup this year, the team has been struggling. So, yeah, there's team metrics that tell you objectively that this Bruins team isn't good. We've talked about them all year. That whether it's goal differential, where they're 27th in the league, whether it's the power play, where they're 30th in the league, whether it's the penalty kill, where they're 25th in the league, those are or team save percentage, where they're 25th in the league. Those are main metrics you can look at and say, this team is not good at even strength, and they're not good on special teams. But this team's also not good at some of the intangibles of the game that you don't really have main statistics for. They're out there, but you're not going to find them on the main page of NHL.com. And that's like, how do you respond after you score a goal and after an opponent scores a goal? Well, far too often this year, the Bruins respond negatively, regardless of who scores. The other key one,
at the beginning of the season, that wasn't the case. Like, they would throw the 4th line out there after a goal from either team, and then they would like extend the lead. But that's been a long time since that.
But even then, it was that one line, right?
It was the one line. But I mean, it was a something that they went to pretty much every game back then. And obviously, Kastelic is not probably 100% the way he was to start the season after his injury, and so it's certainly, you notice the difference that makes to that line.
And also,
and like Beecher and Koepke have fallen off a lot. Like, they started hot. I think it's been, quite frankly, months since either of them has played good hockey. So
yeah, that I was going to highlight that as well. Like, we spent so much time talking about the lack of scoring in the top 6 and the middle 6, but I'm guilty of this. But to that point, Scott, I think Johnny Beecher in particular being a Bruins draft pick, like I just feel like he's skating by a little bit with a lack of criticism. I think it's because there's so many glaring holes in this team. The last thing anybody's wanting to bitch about is, well, this fourth liner's not doing it, because it's just on the totem pole. It's not very important, but we can talk about that as well. The last metric I wanted to mention that is a very big indication of a team, of a strong hockey team versus a weak hockey team. And every coach will talk about this, is never give up a goal in the first minute of a period or the last minute of a period. It's just bad hockey. It's bad business. And the Bruins have done that.
But what about both?
Well, Scotty, and that's kind of where
period.
And that's where I'm getting to. It's like Ty Anderson over at the Sports Hub, he has kept a tally of all the goals the Bruins have given up in the final 2 minutes of a period. I don't know if anybody has it for the first couple minutes of a period as well, but to that point, Scott, last night, the Bruins have a lead, right, entering the third period, and you give up a goal to Mitch Marner in the first minute, and then you give up a goal to, was it Holmberg?
Yeah.
Holmberg in the last minute, and then you find a way to lose in overtime. And how many times has that happened this year? Where the Bruins, when they do have a lead in the final minute, they piss it away, and they find a way to not get 2 points. So just every which way you look, this team is just not deep, and they just have so many issues, whether it's main team metrics or the intangible ones, and it's just not a good hockey team.
And by the way, the number is 25 times that they've given up a goal in the last 2 minutes of a period, not a game, of a period.
I thought somebody said Ty's total was up to like 29. Was it 25? Maybe I misheard.
It's 25.
Either way, it's just brutal. Just brutal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good teams find a way to win in crucial moments. Bad teams find a way to lose. And like, you look at that tying goal, puck comes up the boards. Nikita Zadorov just has to bank it out of the zone, and he whiffs and turns it over. I think it was it Robertson who got behind him and took it down low, but whoever. He just didn't execute the play. Like, you just have to get the puck out of the zone there. And Nikita Zadorov does not. And 2 seconds later, it's on the back of the net. Like, that's what bad teams do. Like, that's how you blow a lead at the end of regulation instead of closing out a win.
Bridget and Scott, I didn't intend on starting here because, again, with a team like the Bruins this year, there's a lot of issues. Do you feel as though that we here on the Skate Pod and perhaps Bruins fans and media in general have not talked about Jeremy Swayman's play enough this year? Because again, he gives up 5 goals, and Scott, some listeners were mentioning to you and I think both on Twitter last night, just calling out that fact, or at least to me. I don't know if it was to you, but you see it out there where it's like, what about Swayman? And like, he's not the only issue, but he has, and I'll be frank right now. I think this Bruins team is so bad. I don't think that Ken Dryden could pull this team to cover up all their mistakes. But Swayman definitely hasn't done a great job in doing his part to cover up, as many mistakes as he can. And I'm just curious how you guys feel his game is. I think that I wonder if this is just an off year on a bad team for him, and he's going to bounce back next year. And I think that's best case. Worst case is that, some of these off-season negotiations going public the way that they did due to Swayman himself and the Bruins. Part of me wonders if there's a possibility that there could have been some psychological damage that might take some time to repair, whether it's a lack of confidence. Is there any part of you guys that worries about that? And because sometimes that, especially with goalies, because they're a different breed, like, I don't know, sometimes there could be psychological damage for something and it takes a player a while to bounce back, or maybe they never recover. And I'm not saying it's going to happen with Swayman, but has that ever crossed your mind?
I don't think it's psychological. I'd say if it is, then you should trade him right now because that would be the sign of a mentally weak player who should not be your number one goalie. I think it's physical. I think it's season prep. He missed the entire preseason and training camp, and I think that put him behind the eight ball. He's been trying to play catch up all year. There was that stretch coming out of Christmas break where it looked like he had turned the corner. And now I think he's kind of regressed again. And yeah, I think ultimately him and several other guys on this team, you're going to have to hope it was just a down year, almost a lost season, throw it in the trash, come back better next year. As it relates to last night specifically, like he got hung out to dry a few times. For me, the one that I would point to was the third goal that tied the game 3-3, where it's Robertson coming down the left wing in the rush, shoots it from outside the left faceoff dot, and just beats him clean glove side. You need a save there. And I could almost feel that coming because the commercial break right before that.
Wait, the
I
one
don't know
with
if he
Chipotle?
tweaked something. Sorry, what was that?
Not the one with Chipotle?
No. Oh yeah. Well,
Holy shit, guys, what is going on? I don't mean to deviate you, Scott. We can jump back to Nesson, but my God.
Yeah, Nesson had an interesting way to cover Morgan Geeky's power play goal where just as he was shooting, it cut to a Chipotle commercial. So
yeah, and it was like when I watched it back, I laughed so hard because it was almost like a jump scare because it's like the puck is like about to go in the net, and then all of a sudden this guy just like opens a pan and it's like it's his face, and it's just like, oh my god.
Yeah, but so right before giving up that third goal, like the previous commercial break, Swayman was slow to get up after making a save, and I don't know if he might have just got hit in the nuts, honestly, like the way that he was reacting. Like, I mean, it's funny to say, but like that's actually what it looked like to me. Was like he looked like a guy who just got hit in a very sensitive area and needed a few minutes to himself. But then he's like shaking it off and he's kind of like skating around, and
nobody
that was the
about
very
this
next
after the
shot
game?
that ends up beating him. And I'm like, yeah, you just kind of feel it. It's like goalie little off, gets beat clean on the next shot, and yeah, he needs to be better there. Like that's one where you just need the save.
Nobody asked him about that after the game.
No, yeah, he got asked 2 questions. I was one of them, and I guess no one else had a question for Jeremy Swayman after the game.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a rough locker room which has been the case a lot of times this year. You go down, it's like, okay, it should have been a win, it was a loss. It's like same thing. It's usually Marchand and Pasternak talking, and Marchand said, if we play games like that, if we play like that, we're gonna win a lot of games. But like,
okay,
it's interesting with that being
he
the
says
backdrop.
at game 60. It's like, what do you want us to do with that, Brad?
The backdrop that was, coming after is what makes it like kind of, I don't know, you don't really know how to take it because you didn't win. And sorry for the cat.
Right, again, like it's just not accurate. Like you can't play a really good 40 minutes.
Because you can't. 40 minutes isn't going to cut it ever. So that's
it might against like the San Jose Sharks. It's not going to cut it against the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, but they just played Anaheim. It wasn't great. It didn't have a great outcome either.
I mean, this team is just preying on ifs. They've been preying on ifs all year. Like, so if our special teams improves, if our it just like everything has been preying on ifs, and it's like, all right, again, I'm not saying that Martian's going to sit there after game 59 when there's still technically a couple points out of the playoffs and sit there and say, yeah, season's done. Like he's saying what I expect him to say, but it's just frustrating. And the reason I brought up Swayman is because it is interesting. I'm not suggesting that they trade Jeremy Swayman. All I'm pointing out is that if the Bruins wanted to, for some reason or the other, they this year and next year would be the time to do it, because then Swayman's trade protection kicks in. And so from a business perspective, I just put that out there for everybody listening to think of that what they will. I'm not suggesting they trade him, but if it would be easier for them to do so in the next 2 years if they wanted to for some reason. But Scott, you made the comment that, hopefully, some players, we can just chalk this up to a bad year and that they could bounce back next year. My question to you guys is, which of those players have played so poorly and you don't see them getting much better that there shouldn't even be a next year for them in Boston? And that could be somebody that's under contract or with term, or somebody who's, on an expiring deal. But like a player that just comes to my mind, and like I respect the player, amazing, person off the ice, it appears, and has been a very good Bruin for the most part. But it's like it's like the line in the Sandlot, "You're killing me, Smalls," where it's like at this point I can't, like, it's Charlie Coyle. Like, did Charlie Coyle play last night? Has he been on the Bruins most of this season? And I'm finding it like it's just inexcusable. Like earlier on in the year, maybe guys are banged up, maybe it's a slow start, and maybe guys have lingering issues all year. That's the NHL. Like there are players all around the league that are dealing with injuries, have been all year, and they're still producing. So, like, he's a player I sit there and say, should he even get a next year in Boston? I know he's under contract next year. So I pose that to you guys. Are there players that you're feeling that way about? Because there's obviously this retool that everybody's on the same page with right now, and a lot of the talk is about what free agents the Bruins will or won't keep, but not as much as talked about the players that are under term. Understandably so, because it's tough to speculate when you have term. But in your guys' opinion, has somebody like Charlie Coyle or Brandon Carlo or somebody that's under term, that's underperformed, do you think they deserve another year in Boston when you consider the direction the team should be going in, and if their better days are behind them?
I'm going to say this first, because I think this is the crux of why it's not talked about, especially since the press conference that Sweeney had. He said that it was going to be a conservative trade deadline, a cautious trade deadline, which makes me think that those are bigger moves that wouldn't fall under the definition of cautious.
Can I just add, Bridget, to help your answer? I guess my question includes over the summer movement as well, right? So maybe not the deadline, but maybe over the summer heading into next year.
Yeah. I mean, you don't hear it come up a lot. Like, trade rumors have been, reported on for the Bruins. Carlo did come up in that. Coyle did not, as far as I know, from the Emily Kaplan report, from Elliot Friedman's report, of who guys are. And Emily Kaplan's was which guys are other teams calling about, like which teams are interested, like which players are other teams interested in. And Carlo came up on that list, and Frederic came up on that list. But you don't hear Coyle tied to that. And I don't know if there's, the interest isn't there, or if that's just not a player that people are looking to add right now, or what that is about. But as far as I know, it doesn't sound like he's moving at the deadline. And the offseason, it's hard to say. Haven't heard any reporting about it. So,
yeah, I think teams like Brandon Carlo's contract more. $4.1 million cap hit versus Charlie Coyle is 5.25 for, under 40-point pace. Like, that's not, unless there's retained money, which, by the way, the Bruins could do. Now, that would also mean retaining money next season in the final year of his deal. But with Hampus Lindholm on LTIR, likely for the rest of the season, that is an option that wasn't really in play for the Bruins as much previously, but is now. But yeah, like, I think they would listen on Charlie Coyle if someone's interested, just like they'll listen on Carlo and listen on Morgan Geekie, even though they also, would probably like to keep Geekie. They should be listening on just about anyone. Like, I don't think Pasternak and McAvoy are on the table, but short of that, it's like, yeah, just about everyone else should be in play, at least to the extent that you're open to getting blown away, whether you're actively shopping guys or not. So, yeah, I mean, with Coyle, it's like, does he deserve to be here next year? I don't know. Not much in life or in sports is about deserve. It's, he's signed. He has a contract that he earned at one point in time. So unless the Bruins can find a way to move it or want to move it, then he's going to be here. So, but yeah, another guy that like either, if he is back, you just have to hope not necessarily that he's going to get back to 60-point level that he was at last year, but to 45 points, to something more like his norm, and not, something in between these two extremes of career best year last year and now like one of the worst seasons of his career this year. So yeah, it's been frustrating, obviously, to watch him. Like, just doesn't look like the same player, doesn't look nearly as involved. You don't see him holding on to pucks in the offensive zone, taking pucks to the net, using his size and physicality to ward off defenders. Like, it has all happened far less frequently than we saw last year, but even in years before that.
Well, and I've said about Coyle, I've talked about expectations for him at different points, what I expect of him, and it's never been the 60 points from last year. And people have mentioned to me he's not a 60-point guy, and that's like, and I agree. I know. I mean, he was at one time in his career, obviously probably an outlier. But when I talk about Coyle's expectations, my expectations for him, it's not the 60-point guy that he was one time. It's the 40 to 45-point guy that he's been in Boston since coming over in 2019. And I guess so the whole should they or could they move them is, I understand the question being like, well, I don't know what they're going to do or if they could. So I guess I'll ask you guys this. And look, like, I understand it's difficult because, like, we're on a public platform. I don't talk to the players after games. I don't have a relationship with them. I feel a little bit more free to say what I want. And if I were in your guys' position, I can understand like not wanting to burn bridges, but looking at Coyle at 32 years old and Carlo at 29, let's just say that they are back. Are you confident that they could get back to what they've given us for the most part of their Boston tenure? Or do you look at Coyle and say, okay, to your point, Scott, he's earned the contract he was given because that's what the Bruins gave him. So his contract's not up. But from a production standpoint, do you look at Coyle and say, okay, he's 32, going on 33. The league gets younger and faster every year. He's just not, for one reason or the other, able to do what he used to, and I'm not confident that he can get back to a certain level. And then for Carlo, same question. He's approaching 30. He's a rangy, tall, defensive defenseman that's playing in a league that's getting faster and more skilled every year. And it's just, he's unable to keep up, and he's not a puck mover anyway. And so these guys have term on their contract, whether they move them or not. Are you guys confident that they can get back to a level they've previously been at? Or do you think, like, to the question, maybe they're going to have to, if they don't move them, they're just beyond their primes, and the Bruins have to ride out these players? And maybe, because you always hear Coyle will be the best 3C in the league if the team was deep enough. Let's just say the Bruins had a deep roster next year. Like, somehow they go out in free agency, they get a better roster, maybe whatever, and Coyle was a 3C. I don't think he would even have that title anymore based off of this year. Like, you'd have to see it, but he's lost a lot of credibility this year, and it's not being disrespectful to the player because it's the results-driven business. So I like these guys are great leaders in the room. They're very, very respectful individuals to the media, to the fans, to their teammates. They're great people. But if we're talking about an on-ice product, I just fear that their better days are behind them. And I think Boston should explore moving them because I don't think they're going to help them as much as they think that they could or should be.
It's hard to project, like, especially if he's banged up and like gets something done in the off season. Like it's hard to say, to be honest, because it feels like everybody's having a down year. Like there's a good chunk of guys that are having a down year, and there's gonna have to be some bounce back next year because you're not replacing the whole roster. Despite all the people that Scott was arguing with on the internet this past few days, they're not getting rid of everyone and completely blowing it up. So some guys are going to have bounce back years. Those two would definitely be on the list. Swayman would be as well. Elias Lindholm, definitely. You need something more out of them next season, and I do think it's just difficult to trade Coyle's contract away, probably. And if somehow in the summer you add a center that gives you more depth down the middle, maybe Coyle does become that 3C and fits more into that role for the final year of his contract. And maybe he's got complementary players that he works well with. It. I mean, I feel like Trent Frederic is pretty much as good as gone based on Sweeney's comments about the unrestricted free agents that he's looking to sign, and pretty much only including Marchand. So I would like to talk about that too, though. We did get a question about Frederic. Scott, you can answer about Coyle and Carlo first, but
yeah, I was gonna say because that'll lead right into Frederic's injury too. But yeah, so on Coyle and Carlo first, like, am I confident they're gonna bounce back? I'm not really confident in anything about this team right now, other than David Pastrnak scoring like one of the best players in the world. Like, I don't know how you could be. It's been such a down year, such a massive disappointment that no, I'm not really confident in anyone bouncing back or this team being significantly better unless they make moves to get significantly better. But there are also there are things that could help both of those guys. If Elias Lindholm is better next year and they add a bona fide top six player, whether that's a center or a wing, and it bumps Coyle down to the third line, either as center or maybe a right wing next to Matt Patra, does that help him? Does that take some pressure off where he's not getting the kind of minutes he's getting now? He's not facing the kind of matchups, like all that stuff. Does that help Charlie Coyle bounce back? Brandon Carlo has not had Hampus Lindholm next to him for the vast majority of this season. If he's paired with Hampus Lindholm next year, does that help Brandon Carlo bounce back? I'm going to say yes, because I think Hampus Lindholm's pretty good. And I think that pairing is pretty good. So, like, there's a lot of stuff that can happen where you can look at it and say, oh, we get to December next year, and it's like, man, isn't it refreshing to see, Carlo and Coyle having bounce back seasons, and we can point to why it's happening, right? Like, maybe they're not being asked to do as much. Maybe they're back in a more natural spot in the lineup. I mean, Brandon Carlo's playing as like a top pairing guy right now with Lindholm and McAvoy out. So that there are reasons to think it could happen, but I'm also not opposed to trading either of them. Again, like I don't know that either of them are essential to whatever comes next for the Bruins. So I'm open to trading them. I'm not giving them away. If the deal is right, I'll pull the trigger. But the deal might not be right. That there might not be the market that that we think there could be. Like there's all kinds of factors at play. It's not as simple as just they're having down years, let's trade them and we'll get a good return. Like, might not be out there.
And I'm not suggesting obviously to just get rid of everybody because it's a bad year. Like, obviously, like Marchand, and we'll get to that, but like he's a guy that people are talking about, should he be traded or not? And right now and next year, he's their second leading scorer right now and would be one of their leading scorers again next year. So like that's not what we're talking about with Coyle. Like, I'm not sitting here saying like, trade Marchand like and blow everything up. Like, it's just, I just think I'm just saying that they got to look at ways to improve their team and try to calculate and project. I know guys are under term. These guys we're talking about, but they have to do some internal analysis. Like, is it benefiting the team to try to move on from these guys, even though their contracts aren't up yet? But you're right. Like there are things and measures that could be put in place that around these guys that could help them personnel wise. But then there's going to be things that they can do themselves, whether it's getting healthier or whatever, training a different way in the off season, or just mentally saying, F the world, I'm going to show that last year was a bad year. There's ways that they can bounce back. I'm not discrediting that possibility. One thing about Carlo bouncing back, as you mentioned with Lindholm coming back would be a big help for Carlo. Like Coyle, I look at Coyle and I say, you're playing with you've been playing in the top 6. Like, you have less of an excuse personnel wise, because, it's not like his like centerman went down or his winger went down, but Carlo's partner has gone down. I am fearful. We can talk about this later, but I am fearful of Hampus Lindholm's long-term health, and if this knee issue is going to be something that is recurring. Somebody mentioned online that this is something similar, I think, to what Kevin Miller went through towards the end of his career, and we all know how that ended. So if Carlo bouncing back is entirely dependent on Hampus Lindholm, it makes me nervous, because I don't know if Hampus Lindholm will himself be healthy with these knee issues, but that's just obviously we don't know.
And this is part of the reason why they really pulled the reins back here and essentially have shut him down for the season. And Sweeney even mentioned this. He said, we're going to let it heal more naturally. Basically, like, just give it all the time it needs and hope he's 100% by training camp next year, which it sounds like he should be, as long as there's no, setback. If you remember with Kevin Miller, like, the first real problem in his recovery was he rushed to get back for the playoffs and then re-injured it. And it's like, you get that from a player's perspective, and even from the team's perspective. Like, obviously, yeah, Kevin Miller wants to play in the playoffs. That wound up being a decision that proved costly in the long run. And I think if everyone could have done it over again, you look back on it, I don't know, maybe not. You know what? Maybe I shouldn't speak for Kevin Miller. Maybe he'd say I try to get back for the playoffs again every single time. But ultimately that, did really derail his career, not giving it the time it needed to fully heal.
Yeah, and maybe the training staff would have done something differently, not just the player. But I wanted to get to the Frederic thing. We did get I'll just read the question that we got from one of our viewers, listeners. CJ sent us this email, I think late last night. And his first question was, if Freddie is out long term, I assume Sweeney won't be able to move him before the trade deadline. Then Freddie will probably walk as a UFA, and the Bruins will not get anything in return. Why didn't Sweeney move him earlier? What will the implications be for the Bruins if they get nothing in return for Frederic? So first of all, we should talk about the actual injury that's referred to here. Frederic in the second period, kind of early on in the second period, takes a hit from McCabe, leaves, doesn't come back the rest of the game. Kind of got up really slow, took him a little bit to get to the bench. So obviously a concern when you're talking about Frederic, who's probably the primary guy that is valuable at the trade deadline to other teams, more so than some of the other UFAs like Brazeau and Kepke and Wotherspoon. So yeah, let's start with the injury, and then what does this do for the Bruins trade deadline? And part of that question was also, why didn't he move him earlier? I think I can answer that right now. That's just, he was waiting till he saw what the picture of this team was going to be. And if they were, eventually he was resigned to the fact that this was a selling team, but was really hoping to not have to do that. That's what I think the reason is why he's waited. And most teams wait this long to the deadline, especially for players like this.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not even just that Sweeney was waiting to figure out if they're going to buy or sell. It's also waiting out the market. Like, I think it's been known for a little while now that Trent Frederic's available. But if you're Don Sweeney and say you want a second round pick for him, because players like that have gone for a second round pick in the past. I saw Daily Faceoff had a write up. They kind of go through like every day they have like a different player on the market and look at what their value could be or whatever. And one of the comparables was 2 years ago, Lars Eller got traded for a second round pick. Like that's fairly similar type of third line player. Maybe the contenders are, slow playing in. They're not offering a second round pick yet. And it was going to take until a little closer to the deadline before someone gets desperate enough to pull the trigger. So that's the nature of the trade deadline. Like a lot of it is waiting out the market, waiting for one side to cave. If maybe Sweeney could have taken a third round pick last week for him. Okay, but I would say it's worth it to try to wait and get the second. That's just me. Maybe people will disagree. Injuries happen. Like you just, I can't go down that road of like, oh, he got hurt, so now Don Sweeney screwed it up by not trading him earlier. Like, no, the trade deadline is a waiting game. There's literally a date on it, March 7th. Oftentimes, deals take until that week before to get done because I made this point before. Like, look at how many contenders have not made their trades yet. Only a couple. Like, there's the big Colorado-Carolina trade with Mikko Rantanen and Marty Necas. Dallas added Granlund and Cody Ceci and might still make another deal. Other than that, like none of the contenders have made their move yet. So they're all kind of waiting things out, feeling out the market, waiting to see what another team does or, who sets the price for a certain kind of player. So it's not as simple as saying like, oh, Don Sweeney could have traded Trent Frederic at any point. Well, yeah, sure, if you want to take below market value, but if you want to try to maximize value, you wait to see who gets desperate enough to up their offer.
Yeah, and the crux of the question and something that probably went through everyone's head, at least it certainly went through, most people on the ninth floor's head that, how does this change what the Bruins are able to do at the trade deadline? Like, is this an injury that if it's so bad that he can't play the rest of the year, yeah, you're not getting anything for him. He's not passing the physical. Nobody's trading for him. If he can't help with the playoff run, like that's just it. That option's off the table.
And we should say we don't know.
We don't know.
Joe Sacco had no update after the game. The Bruins are off on Wednesday, so we're not going to get any update Wednesday either. So we'll probably find out more on Thursday.
Yeah, no, and everybody always asks after the game. We never get an answer for the most part. And which rightfully so, like sometimes it takes a while for swelling to go down or tests to, but if he were to be significantly hurt, there's really nothing you could do to get anything for him. Because he wouldn't be of value to a team that would really be looking to add him for what he might be able to bring during a playoff run. And the sad part is he was doing that stuff yesterday. Like he was looking more like himself yesterday. He was in every scrum after the whistle. He was, he was giving, it felt like a good effort in the first period / 5 minutes of the second period that he played. I thought he looked more like himself. And unfortunately, game gets cut short for him. And we don't get to see him the rest of the way. And then the bench gets shortened. You don't see Beecher out there a lot because, Sacco's condensing lines and shortening the bench. And yeah, we're not sure what the extent of the injury is though. So that's the part that we can't really answer.
Yeah. And let's be honest. The reason that Frederic looked like him, or I'm not even going to say himself, because to look like yourself, it infers that that's consistently what he is. Like he played to what he can be and what he's shown yesterday. And the Bruins played really solid yesterday for the most part because they get up for Toronto. This team loves to get up for Toronto. Like most of the time, their best games are against Toronto. For one reason or the other, they like playing the Leafs. The Bruins players have said it themselves on record. And, so I'm not surprised that they got up for a game in Boston against the Leafs. Even if they found a way to win that game last night, I think that they would probably turn back into a pumpkin in the next game because they just have letdowns against teams they can't get up for. But as it pertains to Frederic's injury, again, to your guys' point, we don't know the details. But yeah, if he's out for the year, that sucks if he's out for the year, then that sucks because I think that the Bruins absolutely could have gotten maybe a second round pick for him.
Yeah. Or even if he's out for a month, that complicates it. Like,
Yeah.
because now a team that might be thinking of trading for him, it becomes like the Pat Maroon situation last year where it's like, well, okay, he might, if things go well, he might play the last 5 games of the regular season. It's like, you're not giving up a ton for that kind of player because it just comes with too many question marks.
But better than nothing, though. Like they would get something,
Sure.
you know? And yeah, it'd be a gamble, but like somebody out there would, as long as a team knows that they could have him by game 1 of round 1, like you would find somebody that would take that gamble, just like the Bruins did with Patrick Maroon. Probably for a lot of similar reasons. Because even if it's just for depth in the playoffs, like a team might be sitting there saying, well, maybe Freddie isn't going to get a lot of regular season time with us before the postseason, but we know guys go down, and it's better to have, NHL middle 6 guy, on our roster. So than not. But yeah, obviously, like Freddie's he's a piece for the Bruins to move. That's no secret. So that would suck. So one other thing I wanted to mention to you guys too is, I know I brought this up to you guys a month and a half ago, just kind of tongue in cheek, but man, like the Bruins, they just keep inching closer and closer to the top 10. Right now, they would be picking 13th overall. I'm very fascinated how the Bruins handle their draft pick, because they are so close. They're so close to the top 10 already. I can taste it. I don't know if they'll get high enough to take a James Higgins, but there are some players. There are some players that have a ton of skill. That at center ice that the Bruins could potentially land. I mean, you got teams drafting for needs. I mean, the first overall projected pick right now is a defenseman. I'm gonna let you guys go because I want to look up this kid's name. There's one name in particular that I think Bruins fans should keep an eye on, even if they have the 13th pick. But I think something tells me they're going to be drafting in June, and somehow, some way, I think they're going to have a top 10 pick, whether it's their own or they trade up a couple of picks. Because this is fascinating to me, because I know critics out there say that this isn't the deepest NHL draft. Well, that's a problem if you're in the bottom of the first round. But if you're in the top 10, like, you're always going to have an ability to find some players there. And I think the Bruins are very close. And the reason I bring it up is because right now they would have the 13th pick in the draft, and they still haven't felt the full effect of no McAvoy and no Lindholm down the stretch, and any players that they depart with at the deadline potentially. So don't look now, guys, but I'm very much looking forward to June if this is the case. Now, I know I can already hear it. Oh, Brian, it doesn't matter if Sweeney's here. Okay, well, I'm going to enjoy a top 10 pick regardless, and at least the prospect of it.
Yeah, the idea of it. And I do blame myself partially for this because I jokingly said maybe they could get James Higgins, and Brian was like, okay, I like that idea. but they would have to trade up to top 3 for that probably. But
yeah, but their play has been so porous, it's giving me hope that they're going to have a top 10 pick themselves without even trading up for one. I mean, they're not far off.
Yeah, you made me think of how, I mean, you'd be excited for June, but just how much April wouldn't be fun. Watching that and, going through that. And Scott and I were going to go to Montreal in April, but maybe there's nothing on the line. We're still probably going to go.
Bridget, I'm questioning how fun watching this Bruins team in a playoff round would be as well. I don't want to watch the Bruins get smoked in 4 games to Toronto or somebody. I might want the Bruins and their fans to be able to keep our pride with a playoff miss potentially. But
Sounds
anyway.
like there's a need for another poll.
Ooh, I like that.
But the last one, you guys were just battling on the internet all yesterday with the blow it up versus.
Scott chose violence. Scott chose violence.
He
I
woke up
loved it.
and he was like,
I saw Scott's tweet just targeting all the blowed up people, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to read all this.
he just went through all the comments and personally attacked every single person.
No, I responded. I think I got attacked more than I attacked people, but no, it had been a while since I'd gone in a good Twitter feud, so yeah, that was an enjoyable way to pass the day. I will say the most of the responses from people who want to blow it up to me are nonsense, because I think it's a lot of people who, as I've outlined on here and wrote a column about, I just don't think people truly think through how much it sucks to be bad for a decade and just hope that you win the draft lottery, and B, you win it in a year that there's a generational number 1 center available. You're attaching all your hopes and future to luck. You might win the draft lottery the year that the Montreal Canadiens won it, where you're debating between Uri Slafkovsky and Logan Cooley and Shane Wright, which, with all due respect to all those guys, Cooley and Slafkovsky are good players. Shane Wright is starting to put it together this year. They're just not generational, transformational talents. You could win the draft lottery the year that it's Owen Power. Again, good player, not transformational. Anyways, but I will say the one decent point that some of the blowed up, there were actually some well thought out responses too. And obviously it revolves around center, which is this idea that you can't win a cup without a legit number 1 center, and that the Bruins don't have a path to getting one outside of picking high in the draft. That is the fair point to make. I still don't think it's worth trading away Pasternak and McAvoy so you suck enough to get that high in the draft, is what I would say to that. Also, something I've been thinking of along these same lines. I'll ask you guys a question. Are the Washington Capitals a Stanley Cup contender this year?
Yeah.
On paper, yeah.
They have the second best record. They have the second best record in the NHL.
Yeah, sure.
Do the Washington Capitals have an elite, bona fide number 1 center?
No, but I mean, we'll find out in the playoffs if that matters. But
right, which is one of many reasons I'm fascinated to watch.
Yeah,
this Washington Capitals team in the spring.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, their top 2 centers are Dylan Strome, who was cast off by the Chicago Blackhawks, was a restricted free agent that they just didn't issue a qualifying offer to. Capitals swooped in, signed him to a 1-year deal, and locked him up from there.
Mm-hmm.
And Pierre-Luc Dubois, who no one wanted. And they traded Darcy Kemper to get.
Yeah.
So there's their top 2 centers. So if you're a Bruins fan, I actually think you want to root for the Washington Capitals to make a deep run, because it would be proof that there is another way to do this, that you don't need Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon or Alexander Barkov.
And that's true. But here's the beauty of this, though. It doesn't have to be something very creative like the Capitals did, or which is finding, NHL players that, teams don't want or haven't been in the right, setting. It doesn't have to be that. And it doesn't have to be, having a massive trade to get the first overall pick, because like I said, right now the Bruins are at 13th, and I found a name I wanted to mention on here. Jake O'Brien Okay, he's a centerman, plays for the Brantford Bulldogs in the
He
OHL.
played basketball at BU when I was in college.
You're going to confuse people, Scott, myself included. Mainly because I know that he wasn't in college back in the 70s.
There's a shout out that like 4 people listening will get.
But Jake O'Brien, he's a 6'1", 172 pounds. So he's going to put on some muscle, but again, he's 18. He's a centerman for the Brantford Bulldogs in the OHL. Right now, he is ranked 11th on the draft prospect rankings, and he has 29 goals, 55 points, 29 goals, 55 assists, 84 points in 58 games with Brantford this year. And at one point, he was projected a top 10 pick. And he's one of those guys that he's hovering around, the top 10, but he's one of the top center prospects in the draft. And I see him right now projected to go at 11, and I see the Bruins around 13 as it stands today. Like, if the Bruins want to go the Washington Capitals route and try to do that, next year, because go for it. But what I'm trying to say is organically, the Bruins have put themselves in a position where they could draft a kid like this right now, potentially in June. And he would automatically, I'm not saying he would in 25, 26 be the team's number one center. I'm not even saying he would make the team next year. But if you put a prospect like that in Boston's system, he has the high-end upside to be a number one center for this team for the future. And then, if somebody better comes along in future years in the draft, go for it. But this is something that entices me more so than who's the next, Pierre-Luc Dubois, or trading, your top players to get a first overall pick or something. Because this kid is a top 10 talent, and the Bruins are right there. And so this is a route that highly interests me.
Yeah, and I won't pretend to be an expert on Jake O'Brien, but among draft-eligible players in the OHL, he's third in scoring behind only Michael Misa and Porter Martone, who are both projected to go in the top 5. So yeah, you're right. He's that next level, just right below those guys who might be there around 10, 12. His
hands, vision, and IQ, from what I've seen, are elite. One of those players, you just watch him and it's something that the Bruins don't have right now in their system. And they might not have to do anything to get him other than potentially pick him. Depending on where the Bruins land in the draft themselves, at most, could the Bruins trade up a few picks to try to get him at 7 or 8? Yeah, I think they could if they aren't in the top 10 themselves. Or maybe they get lucky and he falls to 12. But in any event, the Bruins should have easily a top 15 pick in the draft this year, which that's nothing to scoff at. That's not 29, that's not 30. That's significant. So I'm excited. Now, do I trust Sweeney? I'd be lying if I said I do. But I love the notion of them having a top 15 pick, whether it's Don Sweeney as GM or Big Bird. That's a good pick to have.
It's an interesting choice for you, Brian.
I don't know what my brain was thinking there, guys. I apologize to you, the listeners, and everybody who's ever watched hockey in their lives. I apologize.
Well, okay. So I like the idea, and we'll definitely, as time goes on, as potentially they either slip to a higher number in the draft or pull out of this, and it's not a possibility to draft high, we'll continue to revisit this kind of conversation. But before we go, I did want to answer one more question that we got, because this was a question about someone that both emails mentioned. CJ mentioned this. I'm going to read Kim's question about Georgii Merkulov. So she says, can you explain to me why Wahlstrom keeps getting opportunities and has not been waived while rots in Providence? Do you believe Merkulov will request a trade in the offseason as an RFA unless he's traded in a package at the deadline? If I'm Merkulov, I'm thinking nothing I do will be enough for Don Sweeney to give me a fair chance. So, two aspects to this: yeah. Wahlstrom and Merkulov.
First off, I'm going to say I don't like the assessment of rotting in Providence because I don't think that's what Georgii Merkulov is doing. I think he is continuing to develop and get better. And I've said before, if you're not in the NHL, there are always things to learn and improve and get better at. And I think Georgii Merkulov is. I don't think he's rotting. Secondly, why does Oliver Wahlstrom keep getting chances? No idea. I don't know. I'm out of answers on this one.
Can I say what I saw Scott doing?
He doesn't score and he keeps taking costly penalties.
Yeah.
He got benched last night. He played 8 seconds in the third period. He's been a healthy scratch more often than not. You need solutions on your third line, especially. You need to get some offense from that line. You're not. Trent Frederic's been quiet. Justin Brazeau has gone quiet. Matt Potter's trying to create. It's not leading to much. So, yeah, whether it probably starts with Merkulov. I think he's probably a little ahead of Fabian Lysell right now in terms of earning a call-up. But, yeah, it should be someone else getting a chance there. And, I'll get to I'll let Brian answer first. I'll get to, the trade part after, but I have no answer for why Oliver Wahlstrom keeps getting chances. I would be moving on. I think you have guys in Providence who can give you more than what he's given you.
Yeah, yesterday I saw we were up on the 9th floor. At some point during the third period, I glanced over at Scott's computer, and he's going through the entire Providence Bruins roster, and he's looking for reinforcements. And one of the other reporters goes, what are you doing? You looking for a call-up? And he goes, any of these guys got to be better than Wahlstrom. Just sitting there going yeah, this guy, these guys, I would call up multiple guys here for Wahlstrom. And I laugh because it's fair. Wahlstrom takes the penalty that ends up with a power play goal that kills the Bruins momentum. They end up losing a point, whatever. And yeah, that's a direct example of him hurting the team. And then in the games that he's not actually directly doing it, he's just not adding either. So I agree with the question, why hasn't Wahlstrom gotten waived? I think in the past I've tried to put it more diplomatically, but I think I'm at that point that everyone's reached where it's okay, this experiment should have been over weeks ago. And Scott, you pointed this out at the time, he is depth for the potential for them when they trade away 1, 2, maybe even 3 players that are UFAs. He's kind of just gonna be a person. But I also would rather see Merkulov be that person, or Lysell be that person, or Terry. I don't know.
That's the thing is even if you go to the more veteran or guys who have done a little bit more in the NHL, it's Vinny Lettieri can't be better than Wahlstrom, or at least equal, or Mark McLaughlin. I hate to be so blunt, but he's just a completely replaceable player.
See, it's funny to me that you guys are so adamant about saying that about Wahlstrom, which he is, by the way, he is. But there's other this is how I feel about some other players in the Bruins roster that sometimes I get some pushback on. But as it pertains to
who,
Brendan Carlo, for example, is one example in the back end.
Okay, but who's done more in their NHL career? I mean, let's be real.
No. Not apples to
Brendan
apples.
Carlo's been a very good NHL defenseman. Oliver Wahlstrom has never done anything.
It's not about, but I know, but it's not about necessarily what they've done in the past. I look at things now and going forward. So now and going forward, I view, despite his very admirable career as a Bruin, I'm not saying Brendan Carlo. Okay, let me say this. Let me say this. Brendan Carlo would be more of a loss than Oliver Wahlstrom. Don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm just saying the word replaceable has a lot of room there. I'm not saying he's more easily replaceable than Wahlstrom, but honestly, I shouldn't have even said anything because I don't even feel like arguing this.
I mean, I just think the past does matter. I know that Brendan Carlo can be much more than a replacement level NHL player. I don't have anything to tell me that Oliver Wahlstrom can be.
Or like, I mean, like the other guy we were talking earlier, Coyle. Like, I mean, like Coyle when he's on his game is very good. Or Trent Frederic, he's very good. But when they're gonna give you what they've given you this year, you can find replacements for them. That's all.
Brian, like they at least offer some stability. Like this is a different category to me.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And like someone that you're trying to like get an upgrade on. Like this is a different subset of like. To be honest with you, there's very few people I've gone to like that I've been able to mentally be like, I've given up on this person completely. And this wouldn't be the first team that gave up on him this year because he showed up here on waivers. So
I just want to make the
normally
distinction.
I wouldn't put it like I don't know. He just I can't watch it anymore.
I just want to make the distinction here. The key word here for me is replaceable. Okay? Like 2 players can be replaceable and have different ceilings, different impacts, different pasts. I'm not saying that Coyle, Carlo, Frederic haven't been better NHLers, are better NHLers than Wahlstrom right now. It wouldn't be bigger losses. They would be. But the word replaceable is a very vague word. That's all I'm trying to say. But anyway, I think a part of me has a bit of a soft spot for Wahlstrom because I feel like
he's from Mass.
No,
From Maine.
He's from Maine.
But sorry, he's a New Englander.
I feel like his shortcomings aren't due to a lack of effort. And I feel and I think part of me is like feeling the need to kind of not stick up for him, but like everybody's bashing him and I hear it, but people are bashing him more than other people. And I feel like when he's given an opportunity, he's giving an effort. He's just not good enough at this level anymore. Or because he at one point in time he was doing something for the Islanders and he came into Boston. His first game against the Oilers, I thought he was one of the best players on the ice that night. And then he's been in and out of the lineup ever since, not taking full advantage of his opportunity. But he got I forget what game it was, but he dropped the gloves against somebody who was an actual fighter or close to it, and he got his ass kicked, but he stepped in there. And I just feel like it's a tough situation for him to come into, and he absolutely can be waived today or tomorrow. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying I just feel like he's given it an honest effort, and he just hasn't been good enough, and he's taken some dumb penalties, and I just feel like he's getting bashed more so than other players, and I've liked his effort at least for the most part. That's all I'm saying. I haven't seen this vigor from you guys against any other Bruin in the last like couple of years, except Oliver Wahlstrom.
Like something I don't know
why him and not other people as much? He's not expected much of.
Because most of like I would compare the player you just
where's this vigor for Beecher or Koepke? Like these guys, like what's Beecher done all year?
Not much. I would be totally fine sitting Beecher. I don't know if I'm waiving him, but yeah, Johnny Beecher does not need to be in my lineup.
I'm just saying, Wahlstrom's getting crucified out here. It is like
I don't expect much of him. Okay, but it's a matter of like who should be getting opportunities, Oliver Wahlstrom or your guys in Providence that you've poured years of development into.
But I'm blaming Sweeney for this, not Wahlstrom. Like Sweeney's the one we should be yelling at for this. Wahlstrom's it's not his fault.
No, I'm not yelling at Wahlstrom. I'm just talking about the situation. Like
you hate Wahlstrom. Scott hates Wahlstrom.
I think there's more value in giving these minutes and these opportunities to your own players in Providence that you've spent years developing, rather than the guy that you claimed off waivers 3 months ago.
I agree completely.
That's how I feel about it.
I agree completely with that.
When you describe like Wahlstrom's game, where it's like honest effort, but he's just not good enough and he takes dumb penalties. I'm like, that's also like Max Jones and Riley Tufte, and look. Like they're not getting opportunities. So like I just don't understand why he is getting a significantly longer leash than other guys.
No, me neither. I'm with you guys.
No, you're not.
No, I am. No, first of all, I'm having fun with you guys, but mainly
I'm not having fun. I'm miserable.
Wahlstrom can go, and I've said all along that I'd rather have Lysell and Merkulov in there. I just feel like everybody's hating on the kid, and it's not. He's trying. It's on the GM in my opinion. I want Lysell and Merkulov over him too. I think what happened was Sweeney saw that he had a roster that if they got healthy and things fell right for them, could make the playoffs. I think he saw Wahlstrom as a more safe, young option than some of the guys in Providence, which I've criticized Sweeney for all year. He went conservative, he went safe, and it hasn't worked out for him. And now, to your point earlier, Bridget, now it's like, okay, well, now they're going to move some guys to the deadline, so maybe it doesn't hurt having the extra body around. But yes, it was a desperate move by Sweeney bringing him in. He was trying to find something out of nothing to help a roster he thought, if healthy, could go to the playoffs. And clearly that's not the case. And now he's stuck with this asset that everybody is acknowledging isn't good enough and is ahead of players in Providence that he shouldn't be. I agree with all that. All I'm saying is I kind of feel bad that everybody's kind of like coming at him when it's not really his fault and other players are underperforming too is all. But I if it was up to me, I'd want Lysell or Merkulov over him in the lineup. I'm just kind of sticking up for the kid because I don't think he's done anything wrong other than what everybody else has done wrong this year. You know?
Two things. I didn't realize Oliver Wahlstrom and Brian were related or maybe best friends or something.
I didn't know you guys and every Bruin in the locker room are related because you guys are going at this kid like I've never heard you go at any other Bruin before.
I'm just over it, Brian. I'm just over it. Like it's hard to watch the season as it is, and it's just like, I'm sorry, like I don't even know how to explain why this is, I can't do it anymore. I don't know. Maybe it's about being at the games and seeing it like it happen in front of your own eyes and the speed of it. But it's just not, it's not fun to watch. That's it. It's not fun to watch. It's not making any progress from the time he got into now. He's I feel like gone backwards. So it's not like there's, I don't think that he is deserving of a spot over Merkulov, or even other guys like Letary and McLaughlin. And I don't know, McLaughlin actually did do some pretty good stuff when he was up here. So, and we're not talking about Scott. But and then another
I do good stuff
that came. One other funny thing that came to my mind during that whole argument was, Scott, you saying that you might sit Beecher and like he deserves some criticism too. I don't know if any of our listeners saw this video that the Bruins posted, but it was Beecher and Patra in their apartment, and Patra was talking about how he doesn't have much. He just plays Xbox or whatever. And Beecher said that on NHL, like his team that he built in the video game, that Beecher was his first line center in Providence.
I saw that.
His own roommate. It was like, Beecher's like, I asked him where I was in the lineup. He goes, no, you're my first line center in Providence. You're developing down there right now. Like I couldn't, like, it was hilarious and also mean at the same time.
Look, guys, I'll just finish with this and the Wahlstrom stuff because it is funny how this is all played out. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I like the fire I'm seeing from you guys with Wahlstrom, but from my standpoint, to me, I see a waiver claim or that Don Sweeney was desperate at. It was nothing. I don't have any expectations for Oliver Wahlstrom, and I don't want to watch him anymore either. But what I would say is when I watch guys like Coyle and Carlo and Frederic that we've been watching for years, and we actually do have high expectations for, and
Can we disagree? It was just a waiver claim that failed, right? Like it was a flyer, doesn't hurt much, didn't work out.
Yeah, 100%. But the fire you guys have for somebody that we don't have expectations for, I just wish we all kind of had for some of the players we do have expectations for, and also having a tough watch this year.
I don't think we had fire until you started pushing our buttons.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like we've been pretty critical of Charlie Coyle and Trent Frederic this season. Like I don't remember sugarcoating their seasons all that much or saying that they're playing well. They're just totally different situations. It's like those are all guys you're not waiving those guys. Like if you're moving them out, you're trading them. So the reason we're talking about Wahlstrom is because he is the easiest one to just get rid of and put someone else in that spot.
Yeah. Guys, I'm with you.
And it's also like, and it's the role. He's on the third line because he's not a fourth liner. Like he doesn't fit a fourth line role. Your third line has to score some goals. Like there has to be some offense there. and he has 2 points in 16 games. Listen, if Georgii Merkulov comes up and only has 2 points in 16 games, I'd be okay with sending him back. But, like, can we see it? Can we give it a shot?
Sheesh. I don't know why you guys are
Ryan's
so worked
just
up
an
over this.
instigator.
I don't know what you guys are all upset about. My goodness, we're just having a conversation here.
Yeah, sure.
Come on now. But in all sincerity, to the question that the emailer sent in, as it pertains to Wahlstrom, like, they can absolutely get rid of him, and I would rather. Listen, this is more a line mate going at line mates, trying to draw some piss and vinegar, because I'm trying to stir the pot a little bit. But but the Merkulov part, if I'm Merkulov, I've been sitting in Providence for 2 years, leading the team in scoring, very limited call ups. If the rest of this year plays out this way and he's still in Providence, how could you not want to change of scenery if you're him? I would.
Yeah, if you're the Bruins, whether it's now or you wait till after the deadline, because there is still a month and a half after the deadline, you can get him in enough games, but you have to give Georgii Merkulov a legit look, because if you don't, you're right, then you might as well move on from him in the offseason. Like, if you're not going to give him a look now in what's basically turned into a lost season, to me, that just says you don't believe in him. Like, you just don't think he's an NHLer. So I don't know why you would keep a guy around. What, just to help you finish high in the standings in the AHL every year? Like, okay, listen, I think there's value in the AHL playoffs. I think that's a good experience for guys. But at some point, like, he's done everything you've asked of him down there. You got to give him a shot. And again, I'd prefer for it to be right now or 3 weeks ago. But if you want to wait till after March 7th, whatever. But it does. I think it has to happen this season.
Yeah, it is funny because Sweeney did mention the AHL playoffs. You asked the question, I believe, at the press conference about Merkulov and Lysell, and he said, "Oh, well, they're in an AHL playoff run coming up or whatever." Like, he brought it up, so I don't know if that's more in his consideration for whatever reason, but I think it would be reasonable for someone to just feel like they don't have a future here if they don't see any reward for what they've worked hard for. So anyway, I thought this was going to be a 5-minute answer to Merkulov's question. I think it ended up being like 15 minutes.
Listen, hand up. I was just trying to stir the pot and choose violence. It was pretty much that scene from Miracle where Herb's like yelling at McClanahan. He's like, think that'll get him going. This season has been so boring to me. I'm just trying to have some fun on this. But obviously, logistically, as it pertains to roster construction, like, we're all on the same page. And yeah, I think I hope what happens is what Scott said to me last episode, which is, they give some of these younger guys in Providence a look because roster spots open up after the deadline. I think that'd be the best case scenario. I think we all realize that even if they find a way to make these playoffs, what are you doing without Lindholm and possibly McAvoy as it is? That's a tall task, obviously. So I think what I would like to see is the Bruins try to, get that top 10 pick, whether it's organically or they trade up a little bit. And I want to see what some of these younger players have for 20 games down the stretch here. And I think that's as an organization, like, you should want that. You should want these questions answered more so than going to the playoffs, because we know what that answer is going to be. It's going to be 4 or 5 games and you're out. Bridget has to go. Any final thoughts from the two of you before we sign off?
Nope.
All right. Well, I got lunch with Wahlstrom, so this is actually a good time.
Yeah.
It's actually a good time to get going. Thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you on Friday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.